Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. Earlier this week, we ran a report on Wuhan virus resurgence, how cases were on the rise the world over, how India was bracing for a third wave, with increasing infections for 7 straight days. A lot of you wrote to us about the lasting impact of the wave, about how people had still not fully recovered. In our own newsroom, we have people who complain about persisting symptoms, headaches, weakness, brain fog, erratic heartbeat. It appears that this is more common than we imagined. We spoke to doctors, we started gathering data. Turns out millions of people are suffering even after they technically recovered from the Wuhan virus. And it's not clear if they'll ever fully recover. Some governments are looking to classify them as disabled. Tonight we bring you the trends and the highlights. What is it like to live with long COVID? Is it a disability? Does medical science have solutions? Forget solutions. Have we been able to define the problem? If you've recovered from COVID, it's a report that you must watch. Also on the show, agony and ecstasy at the Olympics, more medals for India, also some heartbreaks as a country of 1.3 billion people celebrates its athletes. In Afghanistan, the Taliban say they were behind the Kabul blasts. They've also offered to safeguard Indian assets, but conditions apply, they say. In Pakistan, after selling luxury cars and buffaloes, they're putting the Prime Minister's residence up for rent. We'll tell you why. And in China, the latest victim of the government's tech crackdown is online gaming companies. They're being branded as peddlers of spiritual opium. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
As the Afghan security situation worsens, the Taliban have claimed responsibility for an attack on the home of acting Defense Minister Bismillah Mohammadi in a heavily fortified part of Kabul. Mohammadi survived the attack on his compound. Turkish security forces have detained around 300 migrants, mostly Afghans. The migrants were trying to cross into Turkey from the Iranian border amid surging violence between the Afghan government and the Taliban. India's first indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant, has set out to sea for trials. India's defense minister tweeted calling Vikrant a true testimony to the country's unwavering commitment to self-reliance in defense. Amid the growing hunger crisis in Tigray, the United Nations humanitarian chief has said 100 trucks a day would be needed to meet the humanitarian needs of the people in the region. According to UN figures, more than 90% of Tigray's population is in dire need of emergency food aid. A police officer died and several people were injured after a shooting incident put the Pentagon under a temporary lockdown on Tuesday.
A Pentagon police officer was attacked on the Metro bus platform. Gunfire was exchanged, and there were several casualties.
The suspect in the incident was shot dead by law enforcement officers on site. Malaysia's embattled Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has refused to resign after a key ally pulled support. Muhyiddin said he will seek a vote of confidence in Parliament next month to prove his legitimacy to govern. A year since one of the biggest non-nuclear explosions in history leveled large swathes of Beirut and killed 218 people. Its judicial inquiry faces a crucial milestone after the parliament votes to allow questioning of lawmakers. The Dominican Republic will slaughter tens of thousands of pigs after detecting outbreaks of African swine fever in 11 of the country's 32 provinces. According to reports, the government will pay the pig farmers the market price of each animal slaughtered. Wrestler Ravikumar Dahiya has assured India of a fourth medal at the Tokyo Olympics by storming into the final of the men's 57-kilogram category. Dahiya cruised through his opening 2 rounds and then overturned a sensational 2-9 deficit in the semi-final by pinning his Kazakh opponent Nurislam Sanayev. He is only the second Indian wrestler to reach an Olympic final and looking to become only India's second individual gold medalist after Abhinav Bindra. Canada's Andre De Grasse has ended a long run of finishing with minor medals by winning the Olympic men's 200-meter gold. The 26-year-old trailed 2 American rivals around the bend, but found an extra gear right at the end to surge home in a scorching time of 19.62 seconds. Reigning world champion and pre-tournament favorite Noah Lyles was pipped to the silver medal by his American teammate Kenny Bednarek at 19.68 seconds.
Were you infected by the Wuhan virus? Do you still feel sick? Are you breathless? Do you feel a pain in your chest sometimes? Do you find it hard to concentrate? Are you losing hair? And most importantly, are you showing all of these symptoms several weeks after your diagnosis? If your answer is yes, chances are you have what is called long COVID. It's a condition that is being now classified as a disability. People with persistent symptoms of COVID are being seen as disabled by some governments. So how serious is this condition? How widespread? I'll show you one example. American actress Alyssa Milano, she had COVID. She managed to overcome the fever, the headaches, the loss of smell, taste and breathlessness. But her ordeal was just beginning. Last year, after recovering from the infection, she recorded a video. She showed what the virus did to her body, more specifically to her hair.
Show you the amount of hair that's coming out of my head as a result of COVID. This is a detangler brush, my favorite detangler brush. As you can see in there, there is no hair in there right now. One brushing. This is my hair loss from COVID-19. Wear a damn mask.
And this is not a beauty problem. This is a health issue. Doctors say this is what they call shock hair loss. The virus places so much stress on your body, mind and immune system that your hair begins to fall off. And that's just one possible symptom of long COVID. It's a long list. Fatigue, shortness of breath, cough, joint pain, chest pain, memory, concentration or sleep problems, muscle pain or headache, fast or pounding heartbeat, loss of smell or taste, dizziness. There could be more than 200 symptoms in all. That's what a recent study found. That's what COVID long haulers are suffering from. They're living with these symptoms. Our cover story tonight is about these people. Why tonight? Because we are talking about another wave. We are looking at an uptick in cases. We're hearing from many of you who have tested negative now but haven't fully recovered. And we want you to know that you're not alone in this. A lot of people who've survived the virus are still struggling, are still suffering. This is a silent pandemic. There are millions of patients who were diagnosed. They underwent treatment. Their subsequent tests came back negative. They are no longer COVID patients, but they haven't fully recovered. They're all with you on this journey to restore their health. What is the scale of this crisis? It's massive. Consider some of these numbers. A study in the United States has found that nearly 25% of Wuhan virus patients still feel sick. After their initial diagnosis, they're suffering from breathing difficulties, high blood pressure, high levels of cholesterol and fatigue. The United States has reported more than 36 million confirmed cases. So if this same trend holds, close to 9 million Americans could be suffering from long COVID. Then we have the United Kingdom. A study found that more than 2 million people in England may have had long-lasting symptoms after they got infected by the Wuhan virus. The crisis is so big that the government has set aside more than $60 million for research into long COVID. What about India? Some estimates were published last month. 40 to 60% of hospitalized Wuhan virus patients in India suffer from ongoing symptoms for up to 12 weeks. Out of these, 10 to 15% patients struggle more. They suffer with symptoms for more than 3 months. They complain about breathlessness, joint pains, brain fog, and chronic fatigue. The United States, the United Kingdom, and India, these are among the worst affected countries in the world. And these are just 3 countries. Long COVID has affected people across the globe. And if you're one of them, what should you be doing? At what point should you escalate the matter with your doctor? Are you going to live with these symptoms forever? Will they ease with time? Does it help to know that your case is not unique? Do doctors have solutions? He heads a COVID ward at a hospital in the UK. He is also treating patients of long COVID. He shared some anecdotal evidence with us. Dr. Fertelman says that 1 out of 20 patients are coming back for more care. 1 out of 20. Even after they have tested negative in their second test, even after a confirmed diagnosis, their symptoms range from mild to severe. Some of them are also reporting cardiac issues.
It's difficult to estimate how many people have long-term effects of COVID. It's probably around 1 in 20. And those symptoms can be mild to very severe and debilitating. I think the people we've looked at most are the colleagues of ours who have gone off work. So we knew them before. We knew how they were physically and psychologically. And we can see that some people genuinely are still very sick and have unfortunately over a year later been unable to come back to work. The main areas of long COVID, as it's called, are probably general symptoms. So feeling unwell, feeling tired, weakness, and then as you'd expect from an illness that affects the respiratory tract or the lungs, people develop ongoing cough and breathlessness. That can be a real problem. And then there can be cardiac problems, sort of fast heart rates, tightness in the chest, and joint pains. Those are really the things we're seeing, and that's away from the psychological manifestations of the illness that.
Physical problems, respiratory illness, cardiac ailments, even psychological issues. The virus is leaving no part of the body untouched. Do we have a cure for the long haulers? Is there any treatment available? The answer is no. Right now, there is no specific treatment for patients of long COVID. Doctors are only treating the symptoms as they come up. So when a patient complains of breathlessness, they treat that. When someone has cardiac issues, they treat that too. Some patients recover. What should you do if you have recovered from the Wuhan virus but are still...
and don't ignore any symptoms, particularly those which relate to either your respiratory system like breathlessness and all, or it is any kind of fever, or it is the cardiac symptoms, or any issues related to your diabetes control. I would pitch those 3 or 4 as the most important things to watch for when you have recovered from the COVID.
But many seem resigned to the idea that they will suffer for life. The symptoms will never really leave them. Even governments and policymakers seem to be of this view. They're looking at disability benefits for patients of long COVID. The United States was the first to move in this direction. The government published a guidance last week. It recognizes patients with long COVID as disabled. It says they should qualify for disability benefits. What kind of patients are we talking about? Those who are still suffering from symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, difficulty in breathing, heart palpitations, chest pain, loss of taste or smell, and joint or muscle pain. The Wuhan virus, you see, has infected more than 200 million people the world over. It has killed more than 4 million people, but those who have survived are still struggling. Here's hoping science can find solutions and not leave an entire generation of COVID survivors with disabilities. From inspiring tales, let's shift to the sobering realities of world politics. The Afghan capital was attacked last night. A car bomb explosion ripped through the green zone. The target was Afghanistan's defense minister. The attackers were the Taliban. 8 people lost their lives, 20 others were wounded. This is a brazen escalation by the Taliban, their first major attack on Kabul, and that too in the green zone. Let me also tell you why this location is important. The green zone is a heavily fortified area. All the ministries and embassies are located in the green zone, along with aid groups and media houses. The green zone, you could say, is the power center in Kabul. But that did not stop the Taliban. Using the cover of the night, they detonated a car bomb. They wanted to kill Defense Minister Bismillah Mohammadi. Thankfully, he and his family escaped. He later went on national television to assure the people that he was fine. What about the terrorists who perpetrated the attack? The Afghan government says there were 4 of them. After 5 hours of gunfighting, all of them were neutralized. This is the group that wants to rule Afghanistan, that calls itself the government in waiting. They attacked their own people in the dark of the night, ended up killing 8 civilians. Is this the new Taliban, the Taliban 2.0 that Pakistan keeps talking about? Look at the damage they have caused. There's debris all over the streets. Entire buildings have been destroyed. What part of this screams nation building? How does this destruction lead to stability? Our correspondent Anas Malik was in Kabul during the explosions last night. He could hear the blasts and the gunfight behind him. He sent us this report from the attack site.
I'm standing at the incident site of the Kabul blast that took place, that literally shook Kabul last night. This is the house of the Afghan Defense Minister, Bismillah Khan Mohammadi, that was targeted. A suicide bomber in a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device rammed his vehicle. That was followed by at least 4 men storming the house. You can see the damage that was inflicted upon. The houses are completely damaged. At least 35 civilians were said to be evacuated safely by the Afghan National Defense Security Forces.
The people of Kabul know who is at fault. Immediately after the explosion, they marched on the streets. Some of them were carrying the Afghan national flag. It was a morale booster for the army. They had the people in their corner. But will morale alone be enough? The Taliban are a ruthless lot. They call yesterday's attack a martyrdom. It's classic Taliban strategy: target top military officials and romanticize suicide attacks. Reports say more assassinations are being planned. At what point do we call this a civil war? The capital has been attacked now. There is massive fighting in the provinces of Herat and Kandahar. Thousands are being evacuated or displaced. So it's time we contemplate the worst in Afghanistan. What if the Taliban takes over? What can and should the world do? What can India do to protect its interests and investments? The Taliban say there is nothing to worry about for India. Let me quote what their spokesperson said about Indian projects. We do not threaten or oppose economic projects by any country. We are in favor of other countries investing in Afghanistan. And then he goes on to say, we want good relations with India as an important country in the region. But don't mistake this for goodwill, because the Taliban want something in return. They want India to stop supporting the Afghan government. No military support, no guns, no civilian contractors. Talk about an impossible demand. India has invested nearly $3 billion in Afghanistan. Why would New Delhi trust terrorists to protect this investment? It's a bad idea, and the Taliban themselves showed exactly why. On Tuesday night, Taliban terrorists tried to attack the Salma Dam again. It's an India-built dam in the Herat province. A spokesperson for the Afghan Defense Ministry said the attack was thwarted. The Taliban were driven back by the army, they said. This is the second time they've tried to attack this dam. Tells you why the Taliban cannot be trusted. They talk about being investment savvy, but on the ground, they're attacking foreign projects. The fact is, there is no Taliban 2.0. They're the same ruthless terrorists from 1996, but this time they face a spirited resistance from the people of Afghanistan. What they need is international support. Unfortunately, they're getting it from some quarters. The Afghan government has called for a special UN Security Council session. Guess who chairs the UNSC this month? India. Foreign Minister Jaishankar will be flying out to New York later this month. This is India's time and India's chance to help Afghanistan, to convince the global community to bolster the Kabul-based government. Let's move to the day's biggest headline from the United States. It does not have anything to do with the pandemic or with Afghanistan. It is about a man who emerged as a hero when New York was overwhelmed by the pandemic last year. I'm talking about New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. An independent probe has found that Cuomo has sexually harassed several women. He's being accused of non-consensual touching, making offensive comments, and creating a hostile work environment for women around him. What's more, this probe was authorized by the man himself.
First, I want you to know directly from me that I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances. I am 63 years old.
This is Andrew Cuomo. He is the governor of New York. You might remember him from his daily press briefings in 2020, or from the banter with his brother on live television. Cuomo had emerged as a hero when New York was in the middle of a deadly COVID-19 wave. 1 year on, his reputation has fallen, just like the cases of Wuhan virus in New York City.
Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed multiple women, and in doing so violated federal and state law.
You heard that? Cuomo is accused of harassing current and former employees of New York. Allegations range from non-consensual touching, making offensive comments, to creating a hostile work environment for women. Complaints emerged in the winter of 2020. A probe was ordered, and ordered by none other than Cuomo himself. Investigators spoke to 179 women. Complaints, New York State employees, 74,000 pieces of evidence were reviewed, including emails, texts, audio files, and pictures. Finally, the findings of the investigation were read out to the public.
The independent investigation found that Governor Cuomo sexually harassed multiple women, many of whom were young women, by engaging in unwanted groping, kisses, hugging, and by making inappropriate comments.
What does this mean? What happens now? To answer that, we must first learn a little about Cuomo. This is a man who has spent much of his adult life in the public eye. Cuomo's parents were migrants from Italy. He grew up in Queens and has been the governor of New York since 2011. Cuomo is a Democrat. Under him, the state passed quite a number of remarkable laws, including those concerning gun safety, gender equality, minimum wage, and paid family leave. Cuomo was expected to run for a fourth term in office in 2022. He had already begun fundraising, but now some of the most prominent Democrats are calling for him to step down from public office. We are referring to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and both senators from New York, Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand.
No elected official is above the law. The people of New York deserve better leadership in the governor's office.
Joining the chorus is Cuomo's old friend and now U.S. President Joe Biden.
Let's take one thing at a time here. I think he should resign.
You heard the demands, now hear Cuomo's defense.
I do banter with people. I do tell jokes, some better than others. I am the same person in public as I am in private. You have seen me do it on TV through all my briefings and for 40 years before that. I now understand that there are generational or cultural perspectives that, frankly, I hadn't fully appreciated. And I have learned from this.
Remember, it was Cuomo who authorized the probe. He asked the people of New York to not judge him until the investigation was complete. Now, New Yorkers have a verdict.
You don't need creeps running the government.
I thought he should have resigned a long time ago.
I hope he has the decency to resign today.
What if Cuomo doesn't? The state assembly has the power to impeach him. New York governors have been impeached in the past. In 1913, for example, William Sulzer was impeached after spending less than a year in office. So what's next for Cuomo? The civil investigation will not directly lead to criminal charges, but the New York police can use the evidence to build a case against Cuomo. The district attorney has already asked complainants to come forward. He has requested for the investigative material. So a criminal charge against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo may be a matter of time. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Turkey is battling a string of wildfires, and the people of Turkey blame their president for the way things are playing out. Since last week, more than 130 wildfires have raged through southern Turkey. The forests are still burning. Locals were seen carrying buckets full of water because the state did not have any firefighting planes to douse the flames. Critics say the Erdogan government did not prepare for this crisis. Here's a report.
The southern coastline of Turkey is on fire. Thick plumes of smoke appear in the sky. Each time firefighters bring one blaze under control, another starts burning. For 7 straight days, large parts of the Turkish Mediterranean coastline have been burning. More than 130 fires in over 30 provinces have been extinguished, but the firefighters are still on the job. Those who have lost their homes are now demanding answers from the government. They say the Erdogan administration's response was very poor.
If there had been more firefighting crews that came here, this wouldn't have happened. Our fire extinguishers, helicopters were insufficient, and because it was insufficient, the whole village burned down, and our homes burned down. If there was a firefighting crew in our neighborhood, this wouldn't have happened.
The result of the lapse is this. Huge swaths of pine forest and agricultural land have been destroyed. At least 8 people have died. This includes 2 firefighters. More than 10,000 people were evacuated due to the wildfire. They are yet to return to the damaged homes, resorts and hotels they left. Turkish authorities appeared completely helpless, even as they resisted offers of help from outside.
I answered allegations that we do not accept help coming from abroad. Once again, I would like to reiterate that not just today, not just during such a disaster, but it is out of question to reject the offers coming to us because of pride and arrogance, because our forests are burning.
But soon after that statement, Turkey relented. It accepted foreign assistance from several countries. Ukraine, Russia, Azerbaijan, Spain and Iran sent water-dropping aircraft. The European Union deployed soldiers and planes. Why did Turkey need European planes? Because it did not have any of its own. Soon after the fires broke out, Ankara admitted that it had no serviceable firefighting planes. When the state failed, many of the locals decided to extinguish the fire themselves. They filled up buckets and water bottles and tried to contain the fire. Critics say the people of Turkey are paying the price for the arrogance of its president. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
How do you decide if a country is poor? Economists have their own tools like GDP and average income, all fancy and complicated. But tonight, I'll give you a new and simple indicator. If your Prime Minister's residence is on Airbnb, chances are your country is poor. The Prime Minister in question is Imran Khan. His official residence is reportedly going to be rented out. What for? Well, basically anything you want. A wedding, a graduation ceremony, maybe a fashion show, or simply a place to chill. Now you may be thinking, where does Imran Khan go? Surely the Prime Minister cannot be homeless. Well, he won't be. Imran Khan was never living at the official residence. He discovered that maintaining this sprawling complex will be too expensive. Pakistan does not have the money for that. So Imran Khan lives at his Islamabad mansion instead. What about the official residence then? The original plan was to convert it into a college or a university. But then again, that's expensive work. So instead of pumping money into the building, Pakistan is hoping to make money off it. This majestic residence could soon be yours to rent. The auditorium, the guest wings, the lawns, all of it. The federal cabinet is finalizing the details. 2 committees have been formed to ensure discipline and decorum at the mansion. But let's face it, if you're renting the Prime Minister's house, the time for decorum is past. As funny as it sounds, this is a serious problem for Pakistan. Imran Khan is not being thrifty here. He is being forced to cut corners. Pakistan's economy is in dire straits. The national GDP has fallen by $19 billion in 3 years. 19 billion. Imran Khan came to power promising a turnaround. 3 years on, his house is on Craigslist. By the way, Pakistan has tried austerity before. It was equally comical. In 2018, Imran Khan auctioned off 61 luxury cars owned by the government. The same year, he also sold some buffaloes. They were kept by former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Imran Khan decided he had no use for them. These auctions may sound like a great initiative, but it's like throwing stones at the moon. You're never going to hit. Pakistan's sovereign debt has entered the danger zone. Total liabilities and debt have reached $294 billion. That's 109% of the GDP. Renting out homes and selling buffaloes won't cut it. Take any prominent lender. Chances are Pakistan is on their list, whether it's the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, or the Chinese. Even Beijing wants their money back, and they won't settle for bed and breakfast at the Prime Minister's residence. Imran Khan is the face of this train wreck, but he wasn't always at the wheel. Successive Pakistani governments have mishandled this economy. They had misplaced priorities, they flooded the army with money, and had no sense of fiscal prudence. Imran Khan has continued this tradition. This year, he allocated 18.4% of the budget to the military. What's the plan here? Shoot the lenders? The Pakistani military's wish list never ends. They justify it by talking about the so-called Indian threat. Guess how much India spends on the military? Around 13%. Pakistan's austerity measures simply haven't worked. And this latest gimmick won't work either. Who do you think will rent out the Prime Minister's residence? Let me give you a clue. In 2019, the same residence was rented out for a wedding. The bride was the daughter of Brigadier Wasim Iftikhar Chima. 2 kinds of people have the money for this booking: the Pakistan Army and their stooges. No country likes the word austerity. They would much rather be excessive and opulent. But for that, you need investments. You need a thriving business scene. Pakistan has neither. Their investments come from one source, and that is China. It's a debt trap. Their business scene is mostly an underworld crime syndicate, and those guys don't pay taxes. So what's left? Cars, buffaloes, and houses. It's an embarrassment of epic proportions. But Pakistan has only itself to blame. How is Pakistan's iron brother China doing? It is tightening the screws on Chinese tech giants. The government is. It is using every trick in the book to rein them in. And these are some of the most successful businesses in China. The latest victim is Tencent. The company lost $60 billion today, 60 billion. Why? Because the state media outlet criticized online gaming. It has called it electronic drugs, spiritual opium. Our next report tells you how China's crackdown on big tech is spooking global investors.
What happens when the state turns against you? Some of the biggest technology companies in China are finding out the hard way. After taking down Jack Ma, banning a ride-hailing service, and cracking down on online education, Beijing has found a new target: gaming. A state-run outlet published a scathing piece against digital games. It called them electronic drugs and attacked the industry for peddling spiritual opium. The speech called out Tencent, one of the biggest tech players in China. Tencent owns a game called Honor of Kings. Reports say it has been one of the world's top grossing games for the past 2 years. But now, the article by the state press has spooked investors. Tencent's stock went into a tailspin after it was published. The company lost as much as $60 billion in a day. Almost 11% of Tencent's market share was wiped off almost instantly. But then came a twist. The scathing piece against Tencent was suddenly removed from the internet. Tencent's stock stabilized, but the company got the message from Beijing. It has decided to regulate the game. The app will limit the playing time of kids under the age of 12. They can now play for only 1 hour on weekdays and 2 hours on holidays. The same age group will also be blocked from making in-app purchases. What happened to Tencent is just the latest in a series of moves by the Chinese state against tech companies. China's market watchdog has now cracked down on at least 35 internet companies. The biggest victim is Jack Ma's Alibaba Group. It was asked to cough up a record $2.8 billion fine in April this year. 3 days after the regulator issued orders against Alibaba, it went after 34 tech companies. Many of them were threatened. Almost all major companies have been fined. They have lost money too. Alibaba, Meituan, Tencent, and Kuaishou Technology are the 4 biggest tech companies in China. By the end of June, they had lost about 20% of their combined worth due to the state's crackdown. Even foreign investors were blindsided by Beijing's actions. So far, they have lost more than $1 trillion, and they have no idea when the crackdown will stop. What seems clear is why China is going after its big tech companies. Beijing wants to rein in the platforms. It wants to curtail their freedoms in the market. It wants the platforms to keep data of the Chinese users at home. And it wants the entrepreneurs to submit to the Communist Party's will. It is safe to assume that Beijing will not stop until it ensures complete capitulation of Chinese tech giants. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Let's turn to West Asia, where there's been another flare-up. 3 rockets were fired into Israel from Lebanon. 2 of them struck an Israeli town. The Israelis retaliated with several rounds of artillery. This comes days after an Israeli-managed tank was struck by a drone off the coast of Oman, part of a larger shadow war. Our next report finds out.
Peace is a fleeting state at best in West Asia. It was less than 3 months ago that fires from the 11-day fight between Israel and Palestine were doused. Israel today is burning once again. Israel's air raid sirens once again went off this morning. 2 rockets struck the northern town of Kiryat Shimona. It is home to 20,000 people. And this is where the town is located on the map. Like you can see, very close to Israel's border with Lebanon. The rockets were fired from across the border. South Lebanon to be specific. It's an area that's under the sway of the Hezbollah. It's a terror group backed by Iran. The rockets torched the field. Israel retaliated, fired several rounds of artillery. In a statement, the Israeli military said, 3 rockets has been mostly quiet since. During the 11-day fight in May, a few rockets were fired from Lebanon. Some more were launched on the 20th of July. They caused no damage or injuries. The timing of Wednesday's strike is not surprising. Just look at what's happening at sea. There are fires and open threats. On the 29th of July, a suspected drone struck an Israeli-managed tanker. 2 crew members, a Briton and a Romanian, were killed. This happened off Oman, and Tehran denied any involvement. But Israel began rallying global action against Iran, with newly appointed Prime Minister Naftali Bennett leading from the front.
Regarding the ship and on the issue of Iran in general, we are working to rally the world. But at the same time, we also know to act alone. Iran already knows the price we exact when someone threatens our security. The Iranians need to understand that it is impossible to sit placidly in Tehran and ignite the entire Middle East from there. That's over.
We are capable of acting alone, was Bennett's message to the West. On the 1st of August, the United Kingdom released a statement. Iran must end such attacks, it said. The United States joined in a day later.
We've conducted a thorough review, and we're confident that Iran carried out this attack. It follows a pattern of similar attacks by Iran.
2 days later, rockets struck Israel from an area controlled by an Iran-backed terror group. You get the pattern. The rockets were the latest strike in this shadow war. Israel and West Asia as a whole is fighting far too many of these shadow wars. Peace in this region will continue to be fleeting at best unless all stakeholders join the talking table. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.